Karen. I think I've met everyone here. And this is my wonderful mother, Margaret Coe, which we're celebrating today. I just thank you for dealing with I know some of the roads were closed off today, and it was maybe a little more confusing, so thank you for sticking out and finding parking or biking down here, or however you got here. Anyway, I've had the pleasure of hearing about and seeing bits and pieces of these paintings evolve over the last 2+ years, and you know, it's so inspiring. I was just telling someone I wish I had half the energy of my mom. She is just so brilliant and passionate and dedicated, and I know she's just pouring her life into this work, so this is a really big deal and a big celebration. And so she's gonna chat with us a little bit about the work, and then afterwards, as always, she's open to taking questions and comments. So thank you. Margaret Coe, let's welcome her.
I want to thank you too for, going whatever way around you had to go to make a point of being here. It's really nice to see you. I just want to give some context. We'll take questions on specific things, but I want to give some context to this. Since 2019, I switched I've been traveling a lot in Europe, just in Italy and France, while painting and other places too, but I'm just really focusing primarily on the landscape right around my house, and trips to the Calapooya River, my favorite place, which is about 45 minutes from here, on your way to Brownsville, or just beyond Brownsville. A couple of places that I have been doing all my paintings, except for the occasional trip to the coast. For that period of time, all of them have been in this thing. And what was going on? I always knew where I love the Oregon landscape, and just the places like there's a woods behind me that it's in a wetland, but nothing's been done with it, so it's got that rough Oregon look. And I always felt that at some point in my life, I thought maybe a decade from now, in my 90s or something, I would focus on that, But but in 2019, I had already booked Airbnbs at Montepulciano and Assisi, and I thought I would paint for like 5 weeks in hill towns, and then I got word that the pandemic was already getting into Italy, and I thought, okay, this is something. And then there's something else that I've been aware of, is that back when Karen was 2 years old and we were on a ship going on our trip to Europe, is that I found a library there, and that's when I read Walden. And it's interesting, because here I am on my way to Europe, and I'm reading Walden. I read the whole book at that time. But I was very moved by that idea of a couple of things. One, living somewhere in solitude with nature for a prolonged period of time was something that I respected. I thought that's really interesting, and it had a spiritual element, because of course he, along with Emerson, were transcendentalists, and they had a particular take on America, on living in this country. They had that sense that they didn't want to just be a repeat of Europe or whatever, that they were really knocked out by the landscapes throughout the country, and seeing meaning in those, and being that sort of like an American quest. Let's look at this incredible land and create our own writing or art based on this, and let's be original, not just a knockoff of Europe, because that's where, of course, all the training and traditions came from. So I always, when I read that, here I am going off to Europe, but I really recognized, that really stuck with me as something of value to do. So when I had to cancel my Airbnbs and everything, and I thought, okay, I'm starting this project that I thought I'm going to be doing this in my 80s instead of the 90s. I'm going to embrace this idea. because remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were really into solitude. You know, it's like if I went out, I had rubber gloves on, you know, and all that sort of, but I thought, I'm attracted to solitude. You know, I'm attracted to the trees and the woods around my place. I go in there and I get something out of that, you know. And there's something about, but the element that I think was the Walden element was just embrace where you are, you know, just go somewhere close and then live there, sort of, you know. And that's kind of what I've been doing since 2019. And I think that, and so I think I had a show 2019 and 20 or something, and I think you saw the beginnings of the, you know, just these really things that were out in the woods. And so how this has evolved is that I've continued to just want to go to these two places. You know, I want to be, there's all these places at home, and then there's this California River, this one location that I like to go that is really moving to me. And I have a sort of a different approach to each location, and I kind of wanted to point out what my approach and my thinking was for each of the places. One with the Calapooya River, when I'm there, it's just like such an immersion, and it's like everything about it is wonderful. You know, it's especially when the water's pretty high. There's just like rapids and crashing little waterfalls everywhere. You can't even comprehend. It's almost trying to count the waves of the ocean. You know, that is so rich and complex. And then I thought, well, it's interesting because, and I also, besides doing drawings, and on one occasion at least on this painting, I did paint on location, but worked a little bit more on it. But is that what I thought about that is, it's real interesting because whether you're drawing, looking, or taking a photograph, you cannot look at the water action at the same time you're looking at the banks and the trees and fir trees in the sky. Is that you have to, your head has to shift, you know. And so on one particular day, I did 3 different drawings, and one was just based on the bank with the trees on. It's around the corner called Immersion. Anyway, just the just the trees, and really when you're doing that, what do you see of the river? A little line, you know, because that's what your vision's able to take in, and that's what a camera could take in. But there's times looking down at the water. Actually, if you were just trying to repeat on canvas what you saw looking down, you'd have no horizon or anything. It'd just be water, because there's all this different, it's like it's a mesh of different directions and speeds, and you know, the water's just so dynamic. But I thought, and this thought that I had, I realized I don't believe is an original thought, because I really think all of your older landscape painters could not have painted what they did unless they're trying to assemble various things that they could not see it all at once, like a camera. They had to assemble and compose it because they're getting so much in. So really, this is not a particularly original thought. But I thought, what I'm going to do, I want to do a painting where I can really present the clouds with the fir trees against them, and also the bank of the river, and also the action of the river. And so I composed that. There is a painting around the corner. It's called Immersion, and it's basically about that. Is it somehow engaging all of these energies into a single composition, because it's not what you see at one glance, you know. And so, but as I say, I'm convinced that all the great old landscape painters were already doing this, you know. And but anyway, that was just a real interest about my experience with the Calapooya. It's like this one over here. That one is right where I'm walking, where I would be walking on the edge. You look right down at this rock with a hole in it and this water flowing around it. And you can't see it unless you're like this, you know. And yet I wanted to engage sort of the energy that that's not the only thing going on this river. So I painted this background pretty early, and really quite abstractly. But I never did repaint. Once I started painting more and more in this part, I never did repaint any of that except for putting a little bit of green in here. I wanted some green to balance against the earth colors. But other than that, I thought, let's see, how about that we have that top of it really abstract, but still having the energy of what you can see of the river. So you know it goes on from there. But really, let's focus on this crazy rock, the hole, and the water coming down from there. And then even around here, you see, even once it gets down here, sort of swirls. So that was, I think this painting was painted after, the other one was painted after that, but I was real interested in the river of somehow getting a dynamic of the water itself, but also getting some background. So that had to be composed. A camera can't do that, you know. So, nor can a person looking one way. You have to involve these different things. So anyway, that was a major interest of mine when I'm painting in California. That came out as being something I was, you know, it's like a concern, an interest. That's what I was thinking about when I'm doing the work in California. Now, let's switch to the things, these trees that are either in my own backyard or backfield, or just a little ways beyond it into the woods. That whole vocabulary is very intimate to me. I know those trees, and of course different light is showing, especially things like the brush that's around. You see, and I've developed some ways of dealing with that. One of them is, if you turn around and look at the painting right behind her, then you see, the thing about a lot of the brushing areas is that it's really hard to, you can't really see where a particular blade of grass or a particular twig is coming from, because it's all woven together, you know. And but it's important as a kind of a textural. It's like a blanket of texture, you know. And so I have been already experimenting with processes that I feel I would interpret what I'm seeing. And this process that I've worked on, that's very apparent, more apparent in this painting than maybe any of them, but although it's in a lot of them, is putting down paint pretty thickly, and then putting newspapers over it, and working different shapes, you know, just and picking it up, and picking it up again. You see what I mean? It's like it's more like printmaking, you know. But also what I like about that is not just being original for the purpose of being original, but you see, if we see things in paintings that we're not accustomed to already seeing, like these textures, I think it grabs you a little differently than if it's, oh yes, that's just like such and such, you know. So I do like to experiment and come up with processes that are just not just technique for the sake of technique. That's just like doing batik or something. There's nothing wrong with doing batik. But it's like if you can find a process that seems to have in it by its very nature, it has the feeling, the look, the touchstone of what it is that's inspiring you. Then you see what you're looking at is not just something that's painted brushstroke by brushstroke, but it's a more visceral reaction. If you see a texture that reads to you like something very familiar, like what you've seen in the woods, but I developed it as a texture for that purpose, and absolutely not. Like, I'm aware that these kind of techniques, you could just do it on canvas and maybe it'd look abstract and it'd be cool, and it would be facile, it would be facile, it would be not it would not be an authentic tool in your toolbox unless it's used to bring out what it is that you're experiencing in this landscape. And so that's, and in addition, there's one more point that I wanted to make about that. Is you see some of these trees have become, they're almost like characters in a novel. For example, there's a tree, there's a thing around the corner somewhere, there's a painting called Two Old Souls, and there's two white dead fir trees. I'll mention this one first because it was really those two dead fir trees that were so old, but they're perfectly white, were right on the edge of our property, right next to our field, but on the other side. And I swear the only reason they're standing is because, well, you know how crazy ivy is. And the ivy had created over the years, had created this enormous nest. It was 30 feet high. And then it was like this big, it's like a bird's nest, only it's for these two trees. And there's two trees very close together. Like you see tree dance over there, that's also referring to those right there. Is that at some point, my husband had pointed out to me that those two trees symbolized us. Because he always said that we lived parallel lives because we both had our own artistic life rather than collaborating or something of that sort. And so he said those represent us. And so it was pretty amazing that for quite a few years, these things, it was like they're 30 feet in, and then they go in because they towered over every other tree in that area. They were so tall, but they're absolutely white. And they were, and I took a lot of photographs of them and actually painted them up. But over the years, since my husband died, they've been breaking off. So what you see now, if you were out there, would be this enormous bush or nest of made of ivy. It's just like this solid structure, 30 feet up, and then out of it, going much taller, are these, except that they only go up about 8 feet or something because they've broken off. So it's two. Now they are just stumps coming out from this thing. But I took a lot of photographs of them, and for this show, in this painting, which this painting I knew that I wanted to dedicate it to my husband. It's called Standing Tall. And originally I wasn't going to even put him in it. I just thought I'll put one of those trees in. That's how you know it's about him, because it's not both the trees, it's one tree. And that particular painting of it is pretty realistic about the way it looked, But as I worked on this painting, toward the end, I ended up feeling there needed to be something, and I sort of saw a figure emerge. And so, because I had originally expected the tree to represent the late husband that I'm trying to do this painting as a recognition of the fact that he's too tall in all ways, and he was tall. But then I just got in for some reason making the face look quite a bit like his, and had a paintbrush so that it turned out to be that, though he fades into this abstract area of painting quite a bit, but he goes off the edge, and he has this cloud thing is just to represent that he is deceased. I don't know if that works for other people, but it struck me that to indicate that. But I feel like I was very pleased to do this painting because, you see, I see so many of the characteristics that I adored and admired about my husband. I see it in both him and Karen. I see tremendous qualities, and so I feel like it's a family where the qualities that I love about him are in my children, And so that was just a tribute. And but that's to point out that I'm using a lot of these things as characters. The other is in the middle of my back field, very close to the middle of it. There's this extremely old oak tree, And being a wetland is sort of leaning over, and I hope it stays standing my whole life because I love it. And this tree, Old Soul, is actually sort of like, this is a tribute to Mark. This is a tribute to this old soul, this great old oak tree. And I've also, this painting back here, there's another oak. It's right, actually closer, if you're closer to my house and where I have my gazebo, you'd see this tree in front of the old oak. And on that one, but it's old. I decided I wanted to kind of get the complexity of the texture of this, and the moss and stuff of this oak tree against the background of all this action. But I wanted to subdue the action because I think my final point of my talk would be that where I think I've arrived is my conviction that not only painting, but life should be lived with reverence. And that these are not, I've been painting on this, and I think that it's just been in this particular series that I've evolved to that point where I just think, I think you can't go, it's no, being clever or anything, or, sort of trying to figure things out or negotiate or whatever is, maybe that might have meant something when you're younger or something, but it absolutely means nothing. I feel like everything, my spirituality is like reverence, and that's where I expect that to lead me into the next body of work. Is it whether it's a tree or the phenomena of the ways a couple of things are working, because a lot of times you do see this brush that's hitting the light in a very dramatic way that's just momentary. But those things are, there's something about all of these images that strike you in a familiar landscape that's very powerful and in a spiritual way. And so I feel with my spiritual life, my prayer life, it's like how I want to get more reverent. I think that's the most important thing right now is reverent. It's like I'm not crazy political or any of these things anymore. I'm just reverent, and that's where I think I will end my remarks, because I think that's where I've arrived at.